The queen lies at the brink of death from your soup, King Ezabata hissed. No one else entered this kitchen or touched the royal meal. You alone were in charge here. His eyes flashed. By your hand, my queen has fallen. In the kingdom of Obaha, the royal palace kitchen was considered a sacred place. Only the most trusted hands were allowed to prepare meals for the king and queen. On a warm evening, the great hall of the palace buzzed with celebration. King Ezabata had married Queen Olamma just weeks before, and a grand feast was held in their honor. Golden lanterns flickered against the mud brick walls, and the air was rich with the aroma of spices and roasted meat. Ekpere Amaka, the head cook of Obaha's palace, stirred a pot of ofe nsala, the king's favorite white soup, over a crackling fire. She was a widowed woman, known throughout the land for her humility and loyalty. With gentle authority, she oversaw the kitchen staff as they chopped vegetables and fanned coals. Her teenage daughter, Ozioma, balanced a wooden tray laden with bowls of steaming soup. Ozioma's heart swelled with pride as she helped serve the delicacies her mother had prepared. She knew every recipe by heart. She had grown up at her mother's side in this beautiful kitchen. Tonight was special, as Ozioma carefully poured soup into an ornament bowl for the queen. She caught a glimpse of Queen Olamma across the hall. The queen sat beside King Ezabata on high dais, draped in shiny, elegant attire. She was young and beautiful, but there was a sadness in her eyes that even her first smiles could not hide. Perhaps she misses her home, Ozioma thought. Queen Olamma had come from a distant village to marry the king, and some whispered she had not chosen this fate for herself. Servants carried platters of yam fufu, grilled fish, and fragrant soups to the royal table. Drums beat softly in the background as praise singers recited the king's lineage. The atmosphere was joyful, yet Ozioma felt a nervous flutter in her stomach. A vague sense of something out of place. She dismissed it, focusing on her task. A child who washes her hands well can eat with the kings, her mother often said. Ozioma was not eating with kings tonight, or serving them. Still, she took pride in doing the job well, hoping one day to earn respect like Ekpere Amaka. When all the guests were served, Ozioma retreated to the side of the hall, near a pillar, to watch the festivities. Her mother stayed in the kitchen, sending out more dishes through other servants. King Ezabata raised a ceremonial cow horn filled with palm wine. "To my queen, Olamma," he proclaimed, his deep voice echoing. "May her days in Obaha be long and blessed." The gathering cheered and clapped as the king drank and then offered the horn to Olamma. The queen's smile trembled as she sipped the wine. Then the queen turned to the bowl of ofe nsala before her. It was garnished with fresh otazi leaves and chunks of fish. She dipped a morsel of yam fufu into the soup and brought it delicately to her lips. All eyes watched. This was the first meal the new queen would eat in her husband's palace, a symbolic moment of acceptance. Olamma chewed slowly. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Suddenly, her hand jerked and the bowl clattered from her grasp, spilling soup across the polished table. The queen's eyes widened in shock. She gasped for breath. In an instant, her graceful form convulsed and she collapsed onto the floor, clutching her throat. A collective scream rose from the assembly. Guests leaped from their mats and stools. King Ezabata was on his feet in a flash, catching his bride in his arms. "Olamma! Olamma!" he roared, panic breaking through his royal composure. The queen's lips were turning pale, her eyes rolling back. She twitched once and then lay frighteningly still against the king's chest. Chaos erupted. Some attendants rushed to fetch the palace dibia healer, while others stood frozen in shock. The festive drums fell silent. Ozioma felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. The queen collapsed. Her mind raced. The queen had been fine moments ago. What could have happened? Her gaze fell to the spilled soup and the half-eaten morsel of yam by the queen's hand. A terrible realization struck her. Everyone would think the food was poisoned. Within moments, the royal healer arrived and knelt beside the unconscious queen. He placed his ear to her chest and felt her wrist for a pulse. A hush fell as those nearby waited, holding their breath. The healer's face grew green. Her heart, it beat faintly, he said quietly. She's barely alive. It may be poison. Gasps and cries filled the hall. King Ezabata's face contorted with grief and rage. He gently handed Queen Olama's limp body to two guards. Take her to her chambers and tend to her, he ordered, his voice tight. Then he rose to his full height and bellowed. Who did this? Who poisoned the royal soup? His eyes blazed as they swept over the hall. Guests shrank back. Some began murmuring prayers. No one dared meet the king's gaze. At the side of the hall, Ozioma trembled. It was our soup, mother's soup. Fear squeezed her heart. She knew her mother would never harm anyone, let alone the queen. Ekpera Amaka treated Olamma like her own child, always making sure the young queen had her favorite fruit and lightly spiced stews. But in the panic logic of the moment, who else could they blame? A burly palace guard stepped forward and pointed toward the kitchen. Your Majesty, the soup was made in the royal kitchen. Only one person oversees that sacred place. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. All eyes turned toward the kitchen doors. No, mother, Ozioma whispered in horror. She pushed through the crowd toward the kitchen, nearly tripping over the hem of her wrapper. Servants and the guards were already storming in. As Ozioma entered the smoky kitchen, she saw her mother standing in the center, wringing her hands, confusion and fear on her round, sweat-beaded face. Ekpera Amaka looked up as the guards surrounded her. What is it? What has happened? She asked, voice quavering. She had heard the commotion but did not know the cause. One guard grabbed her arm roughly. The queen is dying, he snarled. Poison in the soup. Ekpera Amaka's eyes went wide with shock. Poison? No, impossible. I tested every pot myself to be sure of the seasoning. There was nothing wrong with the soup. She tried to pull free, but two more guards seized her, twisting her arms behind her back. Ozioma cried out and ran to her mother. Leave her alone. She hasn't done anything, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. A guard shoved Ozioma back, causing her to stumble to the earthen floor. King Ezabata strode into the kitchen then, his face dark as a thundercloud. Behind him trailed several elders and the chief priest, Anozie, whose expression was unreadable. The king's brother, Prince Obiora, lingered at the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. Ekpera Amaka lifted her chin despite the tears in her eyes. My king, I would never harm the queen, she said desperately. I swear on my loyalty, I did not put anything foul in the soup. I had served the royal family faithfully for years. Please, you must believe me. Ezabata's hands curled into fists. He was a proud man, and he had trusted Ekpera Amaka with his life's nourishment. To hear even a possibility that she betrayed that trust filled him with fury and pain. He gestured sharply, and the guard forced Ekpera Amaka down onto her knees. The queen lies at the brink of death from your soup, King Ezabata hissed. No one else entered this kitchen or touched the royal meal. You alone were in charge here. His eyes flashed. By your hand, my queen has fallen. The gathered crowd outside the kitchen doorway muttered angrily. Ekpera Amaka shook her head frantically. No, my king. There must be some mistakes. Perhaps someone else. Silence! Roared an elder. It was Chief Omekago, one of the councillors. He stepped forward with a grim face. Ekpere Amaka, no mistake can explain this. The queen took her last bite from the bowl you served. He looked at King Ezabata and declared, My lord, in our laws, the penalty for treason by poisoning the crown is death without question. Death. The word hung in the air like a curse. Ozioma's blood ran cold. She lunged forward, grabbing the chief priest Anozie's robe. He was known as a wise man. Surely he would see reason. Please, Ozioma cried to the priest and elders. My mother is innocent. She's devoted to the king and queen. There is no motive, no reason for her to do such a terrible thing. Someone else must have done this. We all ate the same soup. No one else fell ill. Think about it. Chief priest Anozie glanced down at Ozioma with pity in his eyes, but slowly shook his head. Child, the ways of the gods in revealing guilt are often mysterious, but the evidence here is plain, he said softly. Only the queen's bowl was poisoned, and only one person prepared her dish. A wail of despair rose from Ozioma's throat. King Ezabata turned away, unable to look at Ekpere Amaka's pleading face. To him, it all made a horrible kind of sense. Who else but the cook, who had constant access to the food? Betrayal by someone so trusted cut him deeply. He felt as if a black stain of dishonor was spreading through his sacred kitchen and even his reign. His voice was cold and final as he gave the order. Take her. At first light, she'll be executed publicly before the gods and the ancestors for this unforgivable crime. Ozioma screamed, No, king, please, have mercy. She used the term many subjects use for their king, hoping to appeal to any tenderness. She tried to scramble to her mother's side, but Prince Obiora caught her by the shoulders with iron force. Ekpere Amaka did not struggle now. Shock and grief had stilled her. She looked at her daughter, tears spilling down her face. Ozioma, she called out as the guards dragged her away. My daughter, be brave. The truth will speak one day. I am innocent. Her voice broke, and then she was gone, hurled out of the kitchen towards the palace dungeons, her cries echoing down the corridor. Ozioma collapsed to the floor, sobbing. No one paid attention to the young girl. Servants rushed about to attend the king. Elders backed commands, and the queen's ladies in waiting hurried with basins of water and clothes to tend to the stricken Olama in her chambers. Forgotten in the corner, Ozioma wept until her throat was raw. She felt as though she were trapped in a nightmare from which she could not wake. Much later that night, long after the feast had ended in tragedy, Ozioma crept out of the now empty kitchen. The palace grounds were quiet, lit only by a few torches on the walls. She wiped her tears, her mind made up on what she had to do. She needed to see her mother, even if only through the bars of a cell, to reassure her and herself that this was not the end. That night, Ozioma snuck through the shadows to the small dungeon adjoining the palace's shrine. Two guards stood at the dungeon entrance, their spears crossed. Ozioma's heart pounded. She recognized one of them, Okeke, who often chatted with her mother on a calm evenings. Summoning her courage, the girl stepped forward, tears glistening on her cheeks. Please, let me see her, she begged in a hoarse whisper, just for a moment. Okeke's hardened face softened when he recognized Ozioma. He glanced at his fellow guard and with a sigh uncrossed his spear. Be quick, he muttered, and don't let the priest catch you. Clutching her small lantern, Ozioma slipped inside the dungeon. The air was damp and smelled of mildew. In the dim light, she saw Ekpere Amaka huddled on the floor behind iron bars. At the sound of footsteps, the woman looked up. Ozioma, she called softly, unbelieving. Mama, Ozioma rushed to the bars. The two embraced as best they could through the cold iron. Ekpereamaka's face was stained with tears, but she tried to smile for her daughter. "My child," she whispered, brushing a lock of hair from Ozioma's face. "You should not be here." "I had to see you, Mama," Ozioma choked, voice trembling. I don't know what to do. This is all wrong. They won't listen. How can I save you?" Ekpereamaka closed her eyes painfully. "There is nothing you can do for me now, Ozioma. The king's word is final." She swallowed, then looked firmly into her daughter's eyes. "But you must leave. You must be strong. You must find a way to hold your head high, no matter what they call us." Hot tears rolled down Ozioma's cheeks. "I can't just let them kill you, Mama. It's not fair. You did nothing." Anguish and helpless fury shook her small frame. Ekpereamaka reached through the bars and cupped Ozioma's chin. "Life is not always fair, my precious girl. But remember what I always told you. No secret stays hidden forever. The truth will come out one day, like a sun emerging from dark clouds." Her voice wavered, but she continued. "Promise me you will not let this break you. Don't carry shame that isn't yours. Promise me." Ozioma grasped her mother's hand as if to fuse her own strength with her mother's. "I promise," she whispered, though her heart felt anything but strong in that moment. Footsteps echoed from outside. The guard cleared his throat. "Time is up," he warned softly. "Ugonna, take care of my mother." Ekpereamaka suddenly called out toward the door, addressing Okeke by his first name. The guard looked away, unable to answer. Ozioma panicked as the moment slipped away. "Mama, Hush now," Ekpereamaka interrupted gently. She pressed her forehead to the bars, trying to be as close to Ozioma as possible. "Be patient, Ozioma Nwam. Be brave. I know that I love you beyond words. The ancestors will watch over you when I cannot." Mother and daughter held each other's gaze, memorizing every detail of each other's face until the guard's hand fell on Ozioma's shoulder. She was led out, her fingers slowly sliding away from her mother's through the bars. The last sight Ozioma saw as the dungeon door closed was her mother sinking to her knees in prayer, lips moving in silent supplication to the gods. Dawn came sooner than Ozioma wanted. The first light of morning found her standing in the village square of Obaha, numb and hollow. Word of the queen's poisoning had spread like harmattan fire, and a crowd had gathered to witness the execution of the traitor. The king's justice was to be swift and merciless. At the center of the square stood a stone altar dedicated to Ani, the earth goddess and guardian of justice. It was before this shrine that Ekpereamaka would be executed, as tradition demanded, for those accused of heinous crimes against the crown. 4 royal guards led Ekpereamaka forward. Her hands were bound, but she walked with dignity despite her bare feet stumbling on the dusty ground. The morning sun cast a golden hue on the scene, bellying the tragedy that was unfolding. Ozioma pushed her way through the throng until she was at the front. The villagers of Obaha murmured angrily around her. "Poison the queen, they say," one woman hissed. "Such betrayal! And after the king trusted her all these years," spat a man. "She brought shame to our village," another muttered. Some had known Ekpereamaka personally and looked on with disbelief. Others were quick to condemn, eyes burning with righteous fury, stoked by fear. Ozioma felt their words like stones thrown at her. She wanted to scream at them that it was all a lie. But her voice was lost in the cacophony of gossip and outrage. Instead, she stood trembling, her nails digging into her palms. King Ezabata arrived, flanked by his brother Prince Obiora and Chief Priest Anozie. The king's face was like carved stone now. Only his reddened eyes betrayed that he might have been weeping in private. He raised a hand for silence. Ekpereamaka was forced to her knees, before the altar. Ozioma saw her mother wince as her knees struck the hard earth, but Ekpereamaka quickly strengthened shoulders back. Even facing death, she remained proud and composed. Chief Priest Anozie stepped forward in his flowing white robes. He carried a small wooden bowl containing a dark liquid, the poison that would end Ekpereamaka's life. The method was considered merciful compared to hanging or the sword, and fittingly ironic. The poisoner executed by poison. Anozie's voice rang out clear and formal. Ekpereamaka, daughter of Obaha, you stand accused of using the sacred palace kitchen to commit treason and murder against the crown. By the laws of gods and men, you are sentenced to die. If you have any final words, speak them now. A hush fell. Even the wind seemed to still. Ekpereamaka turned her head and her eyes met Ozioma's in the crowd. Ozioma's throat tightened. Tears slid silently down her face. I am innocent of this crime, Ekpereamaka said. Her voice amazingly steady. I have served my king and this land faithfully. I would never harm my queen. Her gaze swept over the silent crowd. Some dropped their eyes, unable to meet the condemned woman's steady look. To my people of Obaha, I say, sometimes the plantain bears fruit that is bitter, but do not cut down the tree without seeking the cause. There was a stir among the villagers. Some recognized that she was speaking in proverb, telling them to seek the truth before judgment, but it was too late. Ekpereamaka finally looked back to Ozioma. So my daughter Ozioma, she said, voice softening, I leave my honor and my love. Whenever one wakes up in that person's morning, no matter how dark the night, know that dawn will come for you. Continue your journey, my child, and let no one tell you who you are. Ozioma's knees nearly gave way with sorrow. She wanted to run to her mother, to hug her one last time, but strong arms of villagers held her back, muttering that she should not interrupt the God's justice. Ezemo Anozie, which is the chief priest, perhaps moved by Ekpereamaka's words, hesitated a friction before he nodded to the guards. They tilted Ekpereamaka's head back. One guard forced her mouth open while Anozie poured the contents of the poison bowl down her throat. Ekpereamaka coughed and sputtered as the bitter liquid went down, but she did not resist. Ozioma cried out wordlessly, a howl of pure despair. As her mother's body was released, Ekpereamaka collapsed onto her side, her bound hands clawing weakly at the death. The poison acted quickly. Her breathing grew raged, then shallow. King Ezabata turned his face away, and even Prince Obiora looked momentarily pale. The crowd watched in morbid silence. Ekpereamaka's eyes fluttered as life ebbed. In her final moment, her gaze sought out the sky above, where white clouds drifted in the morning light. With a last shuddering breath, Obaha's loyal cook died before the gods and her people, executed without a true trial, her pleas unheard. A keening wail erupted from Ozioma. She broke free from the restraining hands and threw herself onto the ground near her mother's still form. Two guards moved to pull the girl away, but King Ezabata raised his hand abruptly. Perhaps in that moment, the king's heart acknowledged a fragment of the tragedy beyond his own loss. The guard stepped back and allowed Ozioma a brief moment. Ozioma gently touched her mother's face, tears blurring her vision. It felt unreal that the warm, kind woman who had hugged her just hours ago was now gone. Her spirit flown to join the ancestors. Mama, she whispered brokenly. The world felt empty. Her grief was interrupted by a cloud of death hitting her shoulder. Get away from her, you little snake, a voice snarled. Ozioma looked up to see one of the villagers, an angry fish seller, who had once laughed in her mother's kitchen, now glaring at her. She got what she deserved, and you too, if you stay there. A murmuring of agreement rippled through a segment of crowd. Guilt by blood, they called it. If the mother was a poisoner, the daughter must carry bad blood too. Someone else flung another handful of death. which scattered across Ozioma's tear-streaked face. Prince Obiora stepped forward, addressing the people. Ekpeamaka's line is caused by her treachery. By order of the king, the cook's name shall be struck and never spoken in honor again. Her belongings are forfeit. Let no one offer shelter to the traitor's child, unless they wish to share in the god's cause. His voice was smooth and commanding, and many villagers nodded along, eager to distance themselves from the disgraced family. Ozioma stared at the prince, shock and hurt mixing with her grief. King Ezabata was still nearby, but said nothing to counter his brother's decree. Maybe the king truly believed Ekpeamaka's family was tainted, or perhaps his grief made him indifferent. Either way, Ozioma realized with horror that she was effectively banished. The only life she had ever known had just been destroyed. Her home, her family, her place among her people. As the crowd began to disperse, no one offered Ozioma a hand or a word of comfort. Some villagers whispered and pointed. A few children, sensing the mood, picked up small stones and tossed them in her direction. One pebble struck her leg. "Go away, daughter of a witch," a boy shouted. Another woman hushed him, but the glare she gave Ozioma was equally cold. Still kneeling in the dust beside her mother's covered body, Ozioma felt despair threatening to swallow her whole. She wanted to scream at all of them, tell them how wrong they were, how good her mother was. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she wiped her face with her torn sleeve and slowly stood up. Her body felt like lead, every motion and effort. The king and his entourage had already departed, and palace attendants were wrapping Ekpeamaka's body to bury without fanfare. They would not even allow Ozioma to give her mother a proper burial or mourning rite. Traitors did not get such honors. This realization hit Ozioma like another blow. As two men lifted Ekpeamaka's shredded body onto a stretcher, Ozioma mustered her courage and stepped forward. She gently touched the edge of the cloth. "I will clear your name, Mama," she whispered, voice raw but resolved. "I swear it. Your spirit will not wander in shame. The truth will speak, as you said." One of the men holding the body grunted impatiently and shoved her aside. Ozioma stumbled but did not fall. She watched through burning tears as they carried her mother away, likely to bury at the far edge of the royal burial ground without ceremony. When they were gone, Ozioma realized she was truly alone. The square was emptying now, villagers heading to their morning tasks, eager to put the ugly incident behind them. Already, it was as if Ekpeamaka never existed, except as a cursed memory. Ozioma stood amidst the dispersing dust, a lone figure in the place where her mother had just died. Slowly, she walked away from the square. She passed familiar sights: the well by the Odala tree where she used to fetch water, the blacksmith shed where she and other children would giggle at the clank of metal. Now, every person she passed averted their eyes or glared. A market woman, packing up her unsold wares, spat at Ozioma's feet as she went by. "Away with you," the woman hissed, as if an evil spirit walked by. Ozioma kept walking, numb and frightened. She did not even know where to go. A small room she had shared with her mother by the servants' quarters in the palace would surely be barred to her now. Indeed, when she drifted near the palace gates, the guards there shouted, "Be gone! No place for the likes of you here." They did not even recognize her in their anger, or perhaps did not care that she was the same girl who had lived there. To them, she was already an outcast. So Ozioma wandered through Obaha until she found herself at the outskirts of the village. As the sun climbed higher, the day grew sweltering. Exhausted, she slumped under the shade of an abandoned market store by the roadside. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she had no money and no friend to turn to for a meal. In a span of a single night and morning, her entire life had been shattered. For a time, Ozioma allowed herself to sob, shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Images of her mother's last moments replayed in her mind in an endless tormenting loop. But as the afternoon sun lengthened, her tears gradually dried up. In the silence that followed, a new feeling emerged in her chest, smothering and angry. It was unfair, all of it. Her mother had done nothing wrong, yet was executed like a criminal. The true villain, the person who really poisoned the queen, whoever it was, walked free, hiding in shadows. Ozoma clenched her fist. She thought of Queen Olama lying pale and still. Was the queen even truly dead? The healer had said her heart still beat faintly. No one had announced the queen's fate to the public yet. Amidst the confusion, Ozoma realized she didn't actually know if Olama survived or died later in the night. Uncertainty gnawed at her. If the queen somehow survived, did that change anything? Her mother would still be gone, branded a poisoner. If the queen died, the blame on Ekperamaka would only be more cemented. In either case, the truth that her mother was innocent had to be proven. But how could a penniless, friendless girl uncover the truth hidden behind palace walls and schemes? Ozoma thought hard. She recalled how her mother always said that patience and determination win the day. Perhaps she could not do anything immediately, but she would not accept this false verdict forever. She had promised to clear her mother's name, and a promise to a dying parent is not easily broken. As evening approached, Ozoma's mind settled on a bold resolve. If the answers lay behind palace walls, then that's where she must go. But not as herself. She was now banished and hated. No, she would have to become someone else entirely. Someone the palace would accept or not notice. Wiping the dust and tears from her face, Ozoma rose and headed towards a cluster of wild bushes nearby. With a small knife she always kept at her waist, a gift from her mother for peeling vegetables, she hacked at her long plaited hair, chunk by chunk. The black locks fell away until she could run her fingers through short, bristly strands. Next, Ozoma bound her chest with strips of cloth torn from the hem of her skirt, flattening any sign of womanly form. If she was to sneak into the palace, it would be far safer to do so as a boy. Girls were not often hired except as kitchen servants, and everyone recognized Ozoma as the cook's daughter. But a ragged mute boy might slip by. From the abandoned store, she found a discarded cap and slid it over her shorn hair. In a muddy puddle, she caught her reflection. Gone was the familiar girl with tear-streaked cheeks. In her place stared a gaunt face, youth with closely cropped hair, grief hardened eyes, and a determined set to his jaw. Ozoma remembered a name her mother once mentioned in a story, Ozondo, meaning the path of life. It was a boy's name, one that carried the promise of journey and survival. It felt fitting. She whispered it to herself, Ozondo, that will be my name now. Saying it aloud made her stand a little straighter. Ozondo was just a common orphan boy looking for work. No one would see him as a threat. As the last light of day bled from the sky, Ozioma, now Ozondo, set off towards the palace once more. She had no idea what awaited her there or how she would even get inside, but she clung to her mother's words and her own growing flame of courage. She had chosen her path. She would return to the palace that had cast her out, this time in disguise and in silence, to seek the truth. Under the grey pre-dawn light, a solitary figure approached the gate of Obaha's royal palace. It was Ozoma in her new guise as the boy Ozondo. Her heart hammered under her threadbare shirt, but she kept her stride steady. 2 sentries stood guard at the entrance, spears in hand, eyes wary after the recent turmoil. Ozondo, Ozoma, mustered a look of timid hope on her face and approached them. One guard scored, recognizing the ragged youth from the day before. "Did I tell you to get lost, boy?" he barked. Ozoma bowed her head and raised her hands, palms together in a pleading gesture. She pointed to her mouth and shook her head, trying to convey that she could not speak. Then she mimicked eating by bringing her fingers to her lips. and sweeping with an imaginary broom. The second guard, a young man, scratched his head. What's this mute boy on about? The older guard sneered, probably begging for food or work. We have no need for beggars here. But just then, the elderly steward, Maazin Wafo, was passing through the gate on his morning round. He paused at the sight of the scuffle. What's happening here? He asked in a creaky voice. This boy claims he's mute and is seeking work, sir, the younger guard explained. Probably a hungry stray. Shall we chase him off? The steward peered closely at Ozioma. She kept her head low to avoid too much scrutiny of her features, but she looked appropriately desperate. You are a quiet one, eh? Nwafo said. Strong enough to sweep and carry water? Ozioma nodded eagerly, demonstrating by pretending to scrub the ground at her feet with vigor. The old steward sighed. After what happened, we could use extra hands cleaning the kitchen and courtyards, and a meat servant won't be spreading gossip at the market. He waved a hand. Let him in. The guard frowned. But the priest's orders were clear. This is just a random boy, the steward cut in sharply. Not related to anyone, and Prince Obiora meant no friends or kin of Ekperamaka. This boy is neither not part of that. The guard had to concede the boy looked like any common street urchin, scrawny and clad in dirt-stained clothes, certainly not like the cook's daughter, who always had neat plate and a clean apron. After a moment, the guard grunted and stepped aside. Fine, in you go, but step out of line and you'll be thrown out, or worse, mute or not. Ozioma slipped through the gate, murmuring a silent prayer of thanks. She was inside the palace walls once more, this time as Uzondo, a slowly servant boy. Steward Nwafo led her across the courtyard into the kitchen yard. It felt strange and emotional for Ozioma to return here, where every corner held memories of her mother. She saw the old wooden mortar and pestle where her mother had taught her to grind peppers, the fire pit where they had laughed while roasting yams. She swallowed hard and forced herself to stay in character. A wide-eyed youth taking in the big palace kitchen for the first time. The kitchen was quieter than usual. A few of the servants were moving about sluggishly. Normally at this hour, Ekperamaka would have had everyone chopping and stirring to prepare the king's breakfast. Now, without her, there was uncertainty. A plump woman named Chisom, one of the senior assistants, seemed to be in charge by default. Ozioma recognized her and quickly looked away, but Chisom hardly glanced at the newcomer. Her face was creased with worry as she tried to figure out the morning meals. We'll have to serve the king's food late today, Chisom muttered to another cook. None of us even knows where Ekperamaka kept this special spice box for his soup. The boy looked up as Steward Nwafo cleared his throat and gestured to the boy beside him. This is Uzondo, he introduced Ozioma's new persona. He's mute but willing to work. He would use someone to scrub pots and haul water. Chisom studied the boy and shrugged. Fine, just keep him out of the way of any delicate tasks. To Ozioma, she said firmly, You, do as you are told and try not to break anything, understood? Ozioma nodded rapidly, bowing slightly in defense. She quickly made the sign of thank you, a little bow with hands clasped, which, while perhaps not fully understood, conveyed her gratitude. This began Ozioma's life as Uzondo, the mute kitchen boy. In the days that followed, she worked from before sunrise until late at night. She scrubbed soot-blackened pots until her arms ached. She fetched heavy pails of water from the well, mopped the corridors, and plucked countless feathers off slaughtered fowls for the evening meals. All the while, she kept her eyes and ears open and her mouth shut. At first, the other servants mostly ignored the new boy. Some made crude jokes behind his back. The mute doesn't gossip, but who knows what he hears? They would say, laughing, yet they didn't see him as a threat or someone important. This anonymity suited Ozioma perfectly. When spoken to, she would nod or shake her head. If she needed to convey a message, she learned to use simple hand signs or occasionally scratch a few words on the ground with a piece of charcoal. Her act worked. Soon, most in the palace forgot that Uzondo had only arrived recently. He was just another servant among many, toiling and invisible. All the while, Ozioma's mind remained keenly focused on her secret mission to glean any clue about what had truly happened to Queen Olamma and who was behind it. Like a little mouse in the walls, she listened quietly to every whispered conversation she could. From the very first day, she started gathering snippets of information. She learned that King Ezabata had ordered Queen Olamma's chamber sealed and heavily guarded. Official word in the palace was that the queen was gravely ill and in seclusion. There was no announcement of her death. Interestingly, this stirred hope in Ozioma. Maybe the queen was still alive. She overheard two guards murmuring that the queen's condition was bad. Her skin was cold and she barely breathed, but she didn't seem completely dead. One guard said under his breath. The other replied, "A curse or a powerful poison, who knows? The chief priest himself is tending to her daily." The chief priest Anozie visited the inner chambers often, presumably to perform rituals or administer herbs for the queen. Normally, a physician or healer would lead such care, but the priest had taken charge. Servants speculated in hushed tones about strange incense and potions being carried into the queen's room. Prince Obiora was stepping into a more commanding role while the king remained anxious and withdrawn. Ozioma noticed how frequently king's brother stalked through the palace with an air of purpose, often conferring quietly with Chief Priest Anozie in shadow corners. Whenever Ozondo appeared with a broom or tray, the two men would fall silent and watch him with wary eyes until he moved away. Each passing day, Ozioma became more convinced that something was deeply amiss. If the queen were truly dead, why hide her body and not allow a funeral? And if she was alive, why was it such a secret that even most palace staff didn't see her? The whole affair was shrouded in mystery, and the answer seemed to lie with Prince Obiora and Priest Anozie. Late one evening, as Ozioma scrubbed the tiled floor just outside the king's council chamber, she caught a few heated words through the heavy wooden door. Prince Obiora and several elders were inside discussing something with the king. "Delay is dangerous, your majesty," came Obiora's muffled voice. "The people grow uneasy with no word of the queen. Perhaps we should at least present a symbol of closure, a burial." Ozioma froze, straining to hear. There was a thud, as if someone slammed a fist on the table, and King Ezabata's voice boomed. "I will not bury my wife while she yet clings to life. The healers have not declared her beyond hope." A tensed silence followed, then the calm, oily tone of Chief Priest Anozie. "King, the herbs keeping her in this state, they cannot sustain her indefinitely. We must either commit to reviving her fully or you trade off meaningfully." Obiora spoke again, a note of impatience in his voice. "We all pray for her recovery, but in case the gods call her, we should think of the kingdom. A prophecy is already being whispered among the people." "Enough!" the king snapped. "No prophecy would take my mind from Olamma, not yet." Ozioma heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly dipped her rag back into the bucket, pretending to be engrossed in scrubbing. Two council elders exited, still talking quietly, paying her no mind. But her heart pounded. The mention of a prophecy piqued Ozioma's interest sharply. What prophecy were they speaking of that concerned the throne? Could it possibly be connected to the nightmare that had befallen her family? That night, as Ozioma tried to sleep on her tin mat in a corner of the pantry, she found no rest. Snatches of conversations, rumors, and that one word, prophecy, swelled in her mind. She knew she had to find out more, even if it meant sneaking where she was not allowed. Clenching her fist in determination, Ozioma decided to take a risk. Much later, when the palace was draped in the hush of midnight, Ozioma quietly rose from her mat. Two other kitchen boys Sleeping nearby didn't stay, as she slipped out of the pantry. Barefoot, she padded through the moonlight corridors. A nearly full moon hung above, batting the courtyards in silver. Ozioma had learned the guard patrol patterns by now. The sentries at the hour were few and mostly stationed at the front gate or near the king's quarters. Keeping to the shadows, she made her way toward the rear of the palace complex, near the grove of sacred trees by the shrine. She wasn't even sure what she was seeking, perhaps a chance to overhear another guarded conversation or a clue left in the quiet of night. All she knew was that her instincts pulled her toward the vicinity of the chief priest's chambers and the shrine where Queen Olamma was supposedly receiving treatment. As she approached a low wall by the shrine, voices made her stop. Two figures stood near a clump of banana trees beyond the wall, conversing in hushed but urgent tones. The moonlight filtering through the leaves revealed them. Chief Priest Anozie, recognizable by his white robe and tall, beaded staff, and Prince Obiora, with his distinctive and confident stance. They had chosen this secluded spot for secrecy. Ozioma's heart pounded so loudly, she feared they would hear it. She carefully crouched behind the wall, peering through a gap between stones. The potion's effect should wear off completely in a few days, Anozie was saying in a low, taut voice. We cannot keep her in that state much longer. It's too risky. Prince Obiora hissed back. And what do you suggest? If she wakes, everything is ruined. The king will hear her side of the story. Anozie shook his head. No, not if we manage it correctly. Listen, the plan was to have her gone quietly, but the prophecy complicates things. It says the next true ruler will come not from the throne room, but from the kitchen. We interpreted this to mean the cook or her blood could usurp the throne. We eliminated Ekpere Amaka to break that line. Ozioma's fingers dug into the dirt. She had to clamp a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. They had planned her mother's death because of a prophecy. The priest continued, unaware of their hidden listener, or her daughter, the girl Ozioma. She slipped away. Perhaps the prophecy still lives through her. Obiora made a sound of irritation. That whelp is as good as dead out in the bush. If she hasn't starved by now, I will have the guards hunt her down soon enough. We'll snuff out the last of that line. Never, never fear. A chill ran through Ozioma despite the warm night. Hearing the prince speak so casually of killing her made her blood run cold, but also stoked a fire of defiance inside her. She crouched lower, barely daring to breathe. Even so, Anozie went on, the queen must remain hidden until our position is secure. We told the king she is in a deep, death-like trance caused by the poison, but soon she must give him an outcome. We may need to make her disappearance permanent if he grows too suspicious. Prince Obiora frowned in the moonlight. Killing her outright was never the plan. She was supposed to disappear quietly, living out her days far from here, while the king eventually moved on. If we murder the queen, the gods truly will curse us. Anozie's tone hardened, impatience seeping in. The gods have already given a prophecy that threatens our plan. Sometimes, one must take drastic action in response. Remember, Prince, if Ezabata learns that we plotted with Olamma to stage her death, your head and mine will adorn the palace gate by dawn. We must never know the full truth. We will say the poison was the cook's doing alone, and that it caused the queen beyond saving. Then, with heavy heart, we will hold a funeral, and perhaps then the king will at last heed the prophecy about new ruler. Obiora placed a hand on the priest's shoulder, attempting a reassuring smile. Anozie, you worry too much. The king's grief and stubborn hope keep him blind for now. Once the time is right, we will resolve the queen's situation without pointing back to us. He glanced around to double-check they were alone. Ozioma shrank against the wall, her heart thudding wildly. Prince Obiora lowered his voice even further, and Ozioma had to strain to hear. And when the throne is stabilized by Olama's death or absence, we shall ensure the prophecy is averted by placing someone acceptable on the throne. After all, who better than the loyal prince to assume power if the king's line in question, or if Ezabata, is incapacitated by sorrow? Anozie gave a soft chuckle. Just ensure, Your Highness, that if you seize the throne, the chief priest retains his influence. The gods will require their due. At this, Obiора's smile faded slightly, but he inclined his head. Of course, we are partners in this. Once I am king, he caught himself. I mean, acting as needed for my dear brother's sake. Your counsel will remain invaluable, Anozie. The priest stroked his chin. Very good. Now, tomorrow night, we'll give the queen a stronger dose of the herb to ensure she doesn't awaken at an inconvenient moment. After that, we must decide either spirit her away as originally planned or end it. The council won't wait much longer to see a body if she's dead. Prince Obiora sighed. I loathed the idea of actually harming Olama. She only wanted freedom from an unwanted marriage, and we gave her that. But if it's between her life and her ambitions. He didn't finish, but the implication made Ozioma shudder. These men were prepared to go to any length. They had betrayed the king, framed and killed an innocent woman, and would even kill the queen they once conspired with, all to fulfill their greed for power and fear of prophecy. Anozie said in a grave whisper, Fear not, the gods favor the bold. We will make the outcome align with the prophecy in our way. By the time we are done, the people will accept that a prince guided by a priest is more fitting than any kitchen-born ruler. Obiora's chuckle drifted through the night air. To think, all this fuss over a cook's daughter. He shook his head. If that girl truly were destined to rule, the gods choose a truly unlikely candidate. She would need a miracle to even survive. The chief priest responded, Sometimes the gods hide their choosing in plain sight. It's why we must remove all doubt. Once she is gone and the queen is gone, the prophecy will lose its teeth. Prince Obiora yawned then. Enough plotting for tonight. Must rest and be ready for tomorrow's council. The king is agitated. He spoke of personally going to pray at the shrine for Olama. We may need to stage a setback to keep him from getting too close. Anozie nodded. Leave it to me. I'll prepare a convincing scene of the queen's downturn. With that, the two men clasped arms briefly and parted. Obiora heading toward the royal apartment and Anozie back towards his priestly quarters by the shrine. Ozioma remained crouched behind the wall long after their figures vanished. Her limbs were stiff and her dress damp with dew, but she hardly noticed. Her mind reeled with what she had just heard. Queen Olama was alive. She had plotted her own forced death using a forbidden herb to escape a marriage she never wanted. The chief priest and Prince Obiora had helped her, but they also had their own agenda, a prophecy that threatened the king's line, which led them to murder Ekperamaka and target Ozioma herself. Now they were double-crossing the queen and aiming to usurp King Ezabata's throne under the guise of fulfilling or averting that prophecy. Every piece of the puzzle clicked into place in Ozioma's head, forming a picture of unspeakable deceit. Her mother had died for no crime, used as a scapegoat to lend credibility to the queen's poisoning. The queen had wanted to flee the crown and unintentionally become the cause of an innocent woman's execution. The prince and priest were using both the queen's plot and the prophecy for their own power grab. Ozioma's eyes burned with tears of anger and grief, but also with determination. She finally had the truth she had sought, but possessing the truth was one thing, proving it to others, especially to King, blinded by sorrow, was another. Who would listen to a servant, and a mute one at that? If she confronted Obiora or Anozie directly, they would kill her on the spot. She realized with a jolt that the conspirators could decide to search for Ekperamaka's daughter at any moment, though they did not know that the whelp they spoke of was sleeping under their roof, Ozioma's disguise could be jeopardized if a thorough hunt began. Time was now critically short for her to act. Taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart, Ozioma slunk back towards the servants' quarters as silently as she had come. Her mind churned with plans. She needed evidence or allies, or, ideally, Queen Olama herself to expose this treachery. As she slipped into the pantry and lay down again on her mat, Ozioma stared in the darkness, eyes open and unblinking. The fear inside was real. She was just a girl against powerful, dangerous men, but her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Be brave. The truth will speak one day. That day had to be now. Come what may, Ozioma vowed that by the next sunset, either the palace would know the truth of Queen Olama and Ekperamaka, or she would join her mother in the spirit world, having fallen in the attempt.